Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we commonly get this question, and I have gotten this question now, that in a hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that women are deficient in religion and in intellect. And obviously, this becomes a huge doubt for many people. And I just want to kind of lay out the framework in addressing texts like this. Um, just as a disclaimer, I haven't really sat down to research it an extent at this moment. And I would welcome anyone. There's a plethora of resources on this just one hadith. Perhaps not always in English, but there's a lot out there. And anyone who has any doubts of any type, you should make it a point to pursue the doubt and find answers for that doubt. But just kind of like a rough understanding of how this works. You see, the first thing that we have to understand is that men and women are different. That doesn't mean that every single man and every single woman is going to have the traits that are often ascribed to that gender. So for example, generally, men are stronger than women. However, if there is a woman out there who is working out and, she's really, really fit, she can probably beat me up, and that's fine. But generally, men are stronger than women. It's just one of those things. So one thing that we have to just acknowledge that men and women are different. And those differences, I think, a lot of times in the current world are pitted against each other. Like, oh, look, are you saying that men are better than women because of this? And honestly, it's just more about being different. I think there's many ways in which I'm different than my wife, and we kind of tend to complement each other. And that's kind of what it is. So when it comes to let's say human intellect and human emotion, they kind of come at a spectrum. You can either be very cold-hearted, very calculating, or almost sadistic, and you can be very, very quote-unquote intellectual and lack emotion, or you can increase yourself in emotion. But oftentimes you have to sacrifice one for the other. If you are very, very emotional, oftentimes those emotions, whether it's anger or love, they are going to cloud your calculations, your judgments, your, what a very cold-hearted person would not be able to see. And you see that on a spectrum, like I said, neither of these are good in extremes, right? It's not good to be very overly emotional. It's also not good to be very calculating. If you look at the people who have tried to make government systems just by being quote-unquote very intellectual and keeping emotions out of it, they've made sadistic government systems and completely have killed people. So to be intellectual is not a compliment. Everyone needs more of a healthy balance of both. So when in the hadith we're seeing that women are quote-unquote less intellectual, it means that oftentimes they tend to be more emotional. And let's be honest, I think a lot of the things that in a female's life require that emotional side of it. We see that as even as children, sisters tend to be a lot more supportive for their family than any other group. And then as a wife, oftentimes we have this concept of male leadership. So, a wife would need to be a lot more, more passionate, more compassionate than a lot of times the husband is. And then as a mother, it requires just so much sacrifice on the woman's part that to be calculating would be actually a very bad thing. So the idea here is that men tend to be more less overpowered by emotion, and women tend to be a bit more emotional. And that's not a bad thing. It's just kind of like a fact of life. that doesn't mean that every single man is less emotional than a woman. It just means in general, men tend to be less emotional than women do. The second thing here is being deficient in deen. And pretty much what that means is that when women are going through menstruation, they don't have to pray, they don't have to fast. Now, that in itself is also not a good thing or a bad thing. It's kind of like the person who's got more duties to do, they have more of an opportunity to reach a higher level if they fulfill it. But they also have more of an opportunity to fall more if they don't do it. So it's like everyone has a different test. So for example, a rich person or a poor person, in the day of judgment, it kind of just depends, right? Most of us should want to be poor for the day of judgment because having the opportunity to have all that money is a test. So if a person fulfills that right and spends that money for the sake of Allah, they are at a better place than a poor person would be. But most people fail in fulfilling that duty, and they are in a worse place than a poor person would be. So if you have less responsibilities, you're more in the middle. And if you have more responsibilities, you're more in extremes. So men, in that regard, because they have more prayers on their account and they have more fasts on their account, they're more in the extremes. If they do it, they're at a higher level. If they don't do it, they're at a lower level. So this hadith isn't really pitting, according to what I think, this like holistic idea where men are better than women. It's more just like they're different, and in these regards they're different. And at the end of the day, we have ayat of the Quran and a hadith showing us that the thing that matters is the afterlife. And in the afterlife, men and women both have an equal amount of chance and an equal amount of opportunity to attain the treasures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to protect themselves from punishment. Hopefully this helps. Like I said, it's not going to answer all the doubts. You're welcome to research. There's a lot more resources out there than what I just mentioned. But hope it helps. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.